Okay? So again, back to the main point. What I'm saying is that we could, if we wanted to, we could add in 100 veto points here, because any one of those senators, Senator Steele here, could filibuster and kill this bill. He could effectively veto this legislation just by talking and talking and talking and talking and preventing a vote from ever being taken. Because after all, if you can't take a vote, you can't pass the bill. That makes him fairly powerful, right, in this sense. All right, we're going to have, presumably we're going to have a vote on the floor of the Senate, and again, the two possible outcomes are it can either pass or fail, so we're up to number 9 veto points. Okay? Now what happens? If the House passes the bill, Senate passes the bill, what's next? Off to the President? Not quite. Okay? Under most circumstances, you're going to have two different versions of a bill. You're going to have a House bill and you're going to have a Senate bill. Okay? And the Constitution requires that before a bill can be sent to the President for signature or veto, it has to be passed in identical form by the House and the Senate. One bill. They can't send the House bill to the President and the Senate bill to the President and say, Mr. President, pick which one you want. Okay? Congress has to send one bill. One of the things that I kept running into and reading some of the essays, well, I say kept running into it at least 3 or 4 times, was someone describing the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the Congress. Okay? I kept running several times. The House of Representatives, the Senate, and the Congress. If you're confused about this point, don't be confused about this point any longer past 134 on Monday, November the 14th. Okay? There aren't 3 different institutions called the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the Congress. There is an institution called the United States Congress, which is composed of 2 chambers, the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. The U.S. House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Okay? So what the Constitution requires is that the Congress pass one bill. Okay? So before the bill can be sent to the President for either signature or veto, it has to go to conference. In most cases, you're going to have a conference committee. The conference committee is composed of the senior members of the standing committees from the House and the Senate that had jurisdiction over this, in our example, farm bill. Okay? And their job is to hammer out language, a compromise agreement between representatives and senators, okay, so that one bill can be sent to the President. What are the 2 possible outcomes here? They can either come up with compromise language, or they can fail to come up with compromise language. In which case, if they fail to come up with compromise language, the bill just dies. All right? So we're up to veto point number 10. But assuming that they do come up with compromise language, what's next? Off to the President? Not quite yet. Okay? The House of we now have a 3rd bill. We have the House bill, we have the Senate bill, and now we have the Conference Committee bill. And the House never voted on the Conference Committee version of the bill. And the Senate never voted on the Conference Committee version of the bill. So you have to go back to the House and back to the Senate for at least a floor vote, okay, with the possible outcomes there being either pass or fail. So we're up to veto point number 12, okay? And now if it passes on the House floor vote and the Senate floor vote, now we go to the President. And of course, the President has the ability to either sign it into law or to veto it. So at a minimum, we're talking about 13 veto points. And Ike has got a really strong reaction to that. I think you're saying that it's hard to imagine that anything ever gets done, right? Yeah, I think that's a reasonable reaction. If you know, that's the reason I like to go through this process and talk about this with you. I'm trying to get you to understand why it's so difficult for Congress to legislate. We started with the observation that Americans think that Congress does a terrible job. They give Congress low marks. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Congress has handled its job? Only minorities of Americans say that they approve. And we said that whether Americans are aware of it or not, that's probably because they think Congress doesn't do the legislating thing very well. They love their individual representatives and senators, but the Congress as an institution doesn't do that legislating function very well. And now you have a little bit of insight into why it's so hard for them to legislate. Now, if that doesn't impress you, okay, 13 veto points at a minimum, consider this. On many bills, we get over here to the Senate side, and they can attach non-germane amendments. All right? Remember what we said that means. Amendments that have nothing to do with the original bill. Okay? They sometimes call them riders. Riders are non-germane amendments. So, as a hypothetical, we start with our original farm bill. We get over here on the Senate side, and a Senate committee attaches a rider dealing with funding for the International Space Station. Has nothing to do with the farm bill. They attach a rider dealing with funding for the International Space Station. Now, why do you, that's just a made up example, okay? Why do you suppose, what might be the political calculation that's going on here? Why would senators do that? Well, there are probably a number of possibilities, but consider that one possibility is that they know that if it was a standalone measure, the funding for the International Space Station wouldn't pass the House side. All right? So what they're essentially saying to the House of Representatives is if you want this farm bill, you've got to take it with the funding measure for the International Space Station. That's one possibility. Okay. Another possibility is that they know that this rider that they've attached will be so unsavory, so unpalatable to the House of Representatives that they'll never pass it. And so this may be a way to defeat the farm bill without ever having to take a vote on the farm bill and ever having to go on record as being against the farm bill. Okay? Maybe they know that this is something the president has really wanted and that the president is really pushing for this funding measure for the International Space Station. Or maybe they know that it's something that the president will be vigorously opposed to, and they want to force the president to veto the legislation. Right? So there are any number of possibilities, but regardless of what the specifics are in any individual case, the point is that they can attach these riders. Okay? And once you attach a rider to a bill, that brings in the full standing committees and subcommittees from both the House and the Senate. So the original Farm Bill with the House Agriculture Committee and the Senate Agriculture, Forestry, and Nutrition Committee and the relevant subcommittees are there because of the Farm Bill. But now you've got to bring in the House committees and subcommittees and the Senate committees and subcommittees that deal with funding for NASA, right? The National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Right? And maybe, since this is a funding bill, you have to bring in the appropriations committees, the House Appropriations Committee and its subcommittees, and the Senate Finance Committee. Who remembers from the textbook what the distinction is between an authorization bill and an appropriations bill?